me go ahead and say a few words of welcome. My name is Rachel Scheinerman. I edit My Jewish Learning and a Daily Dose of Talmud, and you have come to our Off the Daf, a Daf Yomi Talmud book club, where we discuss books related to the Talmud. And we've had some lovely books that we've read so far. And today we are doing our first fictional selection. And it is called Rav Hisda's Daughter, and it is by Maggie Anton, who is sitting virtually across from me here today. And Maggie, you can see the appreciation for your book is already rolling into the chat. So
wow.
Just to remind folks the format, I'm going to just say a few words to get us started, and then we are running this as a book club. So less of an author interview, more as a book club. So please gather your thoughts and get ready to talk. We want to hear from you and talk with you. What did you think about the book? What are you taking away from it? And especially because we are using it as a supplement to Talmud study, how does it change your experience of studying Talmud and Daf Yomi? What did you learn? How are you seeing the Talmud differently from this book? But all comments and questions are welcome. So let me just start by briefly giving you a quick bio of our author and honored guest and a quick summary of the book. So we're all, as it were, on the same page. So Maggie Anton was raised with not so much knowledge of Jewish religion as a child and became a serious student of Judaism in adulthood. And studying Talmud actually introduced her to Rashi, the most important Talmudic commentator. And when you learned that he had no sons and only daughters, who, according to tradition, he educated in Torah, you became fascinated. Yes, and you wrote 3 books about Rashi's daughters, one of whom is Rachel. And years ago, a boyfriend gave me that book as a gift, actually.
Oh, how nice.
Because my name is Rachel. And then you switched time periods and you wrote about the Talmud. And that is a pair of books about Rav Hisda's daughter, the first of which is the one that we read today. And you've also written, just so folks know how prolific you are, 50 Shades of Talmud, which is a nonfiction exploration of sexuality within the Talmud. The Choice, a novel of love, faith, and the Talmud, which is inspired by Chaim Potok's work and set in 1950s Brooklyn. And The Midwife's Escape, which describes the exodus from the point of view of an Egyptian mother and daughter who joined the Hebrews in following Moses to the Promised Land. So by my count, you have written books in a lot of very significant periods of Jewish history. You don't specialize. You've done quite a few.
Well, if I can correct you from something I learned from my research.
Yes, please
do. The people who left Egypt, or one of the peoples, are actually, they're called Israelites. The language they speak is Hebrew. They are not Hebrews. And I know that because I joined Biblical Archaeology Society to do the research on this book, and they were quite adamant on on which peoples are which. You have the Hittites, the Cushites, all the people that left Egypt are something or other-ite. So
okay,
Hebrew is the language, and I can't believe we have like almost 200 people in here. Wow, I'm impressed. I expect you guys to have bought all my books because they're hardly selling at all. Or if nothing else, go on Amazon or Goodreads and put in a good review. But before I take a slight segue to Rav Hisda's daughter,
you got something to show us?
I do. I have a show and tell.
Oh, folks are telling me this. They've already bought most of them.
All right. Well, they didn't buy one of these.
Yeah.
For those you have read Rav Hisda's Daughter, you may recognize this.
Hey, doesn't that belong in a museum?
No, it's broken. I mean, the way that this is
that a real one?
Together again, it doesn't qualify to be in a museum. I bought it at an antiquities store in Old Jaffa. And actually, I didn't buy it. My husband bought it for me. And I have another one that is all put together. It's not pieces that, but this one was easier to find in the cabinet, and the other one's in a locked cabinet where I can't find the key. But anyway, now you know what they look like. They do really exist, and it's entirely possible to buy one today.
I did
All right,
not
let me
think
put
you could
this
just
back
go
where it
by,
came
but
from.
so that folks who are, because we didn't say explicitly, that would be an incantation bowl with some
Yes.
sort of likely protective. Do you know what that spell in particular says on it?
Um, I have a translation someplace that I don't
Okay.
want, but essentially, it probably says what one of the incantations that is in Rav Hisda's daughter, because
Uh-huh.
I wanted to use the accurate, as be as accurate as possible. But
Yes.
generally, the odds are it would have been for protection on some and healing from some illness, or protection from some demon that causes a particular kind of illness. I don't think I have two incantation bowls, but I don't think either of them are for protection of pregnant woman.
Mm-hmm.
So believe me, I haven't. I mean, Rough's daughter came out in the early part of this millennium, and so I don't have. Um, I don't go back to it regularly. Although interestingly, I do go back and read my books that I already wrote um, regularly, just to remind, not to remind myself. I actually enjoy reading my own books.
It's good that you wrote things you enjoy reading.
Oh, well, that's the whole part of it.
Yeah.
All of my books, I wrote the book that I wanted to read. That nobody else had written it. For Rashi's daughters, being in Rachel Adler's Talmud class back in 1992, when I heard about it and joined it, and probably the very beginning of the first ever woman's Talmud class. And of course, there's Rashi every page, almost every line. And she pointed out he had no sons, only daughters. Um, and that's when I got the idea that I wanted to know more about these daughters. According to the Talmud, we don't even have their names, but according to historians, we do have their names. The advantage of writing about um, Rashi's daughters is even they're real historical figures, but they're in a time period in which historians have addressed. So we know about I was about to say, never mind. Okay, we know about the so-called Crusades, and we know about Rashi, that he really existed. We know the history of the town where he lived. So there was as opposed to the book that has just come out, The Midwives Escape, which is based on Exodus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. I got to tell you that everything about the Exodus, almost everything about the Exodus is from the Torah, is legendary. We have very little archaeological evidence for any of that stuff. And to write it, I joined the Biblical Archaeology Society, which frankly doesn't cost very much. And I highly recommend it if you're interested in what the history was back in those days. Great scholars are members of there. I learned a lot about them. And you get a nice quarterly magazine. So as well as the most important part, you get access to every single article that has ever been written by any of their people, which are it's on their website, and you can search for it and you can read them. And that was frankly invaluable, considering I think I paid $100 for membership.
All
So
right.
if okay, I know it's a Talmud group, but frankly, there isn't Talmud without Torah. So if you want to, and unfortunately, there's no uh, Torah society that publishes stuff and puts it on the internet. That I don't know if that ever will happen, but not likely.
Okay. All right, I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to pull us back to the book at hand, which is Rav Chisda's daughter, which is
Right.
not about the biblical period and not about the medieval period, but actually about the Talmudic period and the early Talmudic period. You situate us in the late 3rd century when we are sort of in transition from the Tanaim, who are the teachers who gave us the Mishnah and all those Braitot that they're constantly arguing about in the book, and we're seeing the early years of building the Talmud, which weaves together and tries to make sense of all these sources. So I just want to say like a few words about the book for those who read it a while ago or those who maybe didn't quite finish yet. So we're all on the same page, and then we're going to open this up to discussion with everybody.
Okay, wow, all almost 200 of us, going to be some discussion.
It is.
Or you
So
get to call on people. We don't all get to talk at once.
yes, I said we will call on people. Some people will put comments in the chat, and we will try to incorporate as many people as we can in the discussion. So Rav Chisda's daughter is based on a Talmudic legend in which Rav Chisda presents his daughter with 2 of his most promising students and asks her, which one are you going to marry? And the daughter, whose name is not revealed in the Talmud, Anton, Maggie, Anton, you give her the name, the Persian name Hisda, which means the daughter of Hisda, says,
Yes, the name, I got that name from the people in the incantation bowls are all named. They have to be named in order to be protected. And the vast majority of them are women. And I found that of that vast majority who were women, the vast majority of those were named something or other Duch. They got their father's name with daughter. So okay, I thought, okay, that's going to be my character's name since we have no idea what it would have. That's logically what it would have been. So that's why I called her that, and I feel pretty confident that her name could have been Hisda, as opposed to Rashi's daughters. Their names are historically known.
and of course, Hisda says, I will marry both of them. And
Yeah, that is straight out of the Talmud, and I'm sure that it has astonished every single person that comes along to it. The Talmud tells us that yes, indeed, she does marry both of them, but there is no explanation as to why she said she wanted to marry both of them. I had to create that out of my own imagination. And since at one point I did have a choice between 2 guys who wanted to marry me. Um,
oh,
and
it's autobiographical a little bit.
they were roommates at when I was at UCLA. It did not work. Well, it didn't work out for so well for his since the one she married first died. No, I only married one of them, and here we are,
So far.
55 years later, still married. And you got to see his hand when he put together some of the lighting here. And if anybody's interested, I'll call him over and he can look at the. You can see what he looks like now.
So
I base all my female characters on me, so I can really be in their heads.
Uh-huh. All right, so just a few more words about the book, and then we'll get to discussing with everybody. So in the Talmud, one of the students who ultimately ends up being the more erudite and clever, and he ultimately, after ordination, is named Rava, says, "I'll go last," right? But this novel starts with Hisda, who is known as Dada to her family, and Dodi to her very beloved first husband, Rami Bar Chama. And her early adulthood, right? She learns Mishnah, especially with her grandfather and also sitting in her father's classroom. From her sister-in-law, she trains to write amulets and then later magic bowls, like the sort that you just showed us, which were a kind of folk practice that was meant to protect from demons and other dangerous powers. She marries the one that she loves, named Rami Bar Chama, has 2 beautiful children. He dies tragically. She spends several years in the land of Israel. And from her travels, we learn all about daily life and culture, both in Babylonia and the land of Israel, and something of the relationship between these 2 communities of Jews, one under Persian rule, one under Roman rule. In the background, the fight between those 2 empires is playing out. But we also learn details at a daily life level, how date beer is brewed, what it's like to go into a bathhouse, right? The book is populated with Torah scholars. We get to sit in their classrooms and hear what lessons might have sounded like and imagine the Talmud in its nascent form. We meet slaves, we meet non-rabbinic Jews, Amei Haaretz, Romans, Persian or Zoroastrians, and early Christians called Nazarenes. So the book is not only a Talmudic story, but in the book, not only a Talmudic story, but an entire world comes alive, one that is really significant for the shaping of the Talmud and indeed all of Jewish tradition. So we're really excited to get to have read it and discuss it with you today.
Well, it is certainly my pleasure. And for those of you, I on the websites of all of my books, I have a link to a bibliography, which is usually pages long. But if you want to know more about incantation bowls and Jewish magic, the expert is Chaim. Okay, not Chaim. I'm just going to show you the book.
Yeah, and folks are mentioning in the chat that, as it turns out, today's daf in the Talmud is Avodah Zarah 12. This wasn't planned, folks, but it does feature demons.
Okay, Gideon Bohak. Oh, it's reflecting off of okay. Ancient Jewish Magic. There's a very nice incantation bowl on the cover, but he is the world's expert on ancient Jewish magic. And you can tell he has a great authority because the publisher of this book is Cambridge University Press. And I got this book because I wanted to know about the quote superstitions that Rashi's family would have been still observing. And from there, when I started writing Rav Hisda's daughter series, I had already familiarized myself with ancient Jewish magic, which was still quite popular and practiced in the Middle Ages. So that's part of what got me into writing the Rav Hisda series. But mostly I was intrigued, of course, with this girl, a young woman. She couldn't have been more than like 10 when she was asked, who do you want to marry? And you're looking at these 2 pimple-faced guys who, after sitting in her father's class with all of these guys, she would have seen that they hated each other. That we have Talmud where they're calling each other names and how stupid they are and how wrong they are and what's the matter with you. They really came across as real teenage boys who were clearly quite antagonistic to each other and jealous of each other. So I couldn't pass up an opportunity after I had finished with Rashi's Daughters, and it turned out to be successful beyond my imagination. It is still my most popular. Rashi's Daughters book 1 is still my most popular book. It sells the most copies. And to be in print this many years later is just mind-boggling that should have happened. But I rarely get a chance to do book groups on it.
Well, we're glad you're here today. I'm going to go ahead and throw this out to the audience. All right. I see that there's some questions for extra resources, so we will send a follow-up email. But let me throw this out to the audience, and please go ahead and put up your hands. I see some folks are doing it already. How did this book enhance your study of Talmud? So, okay. And I'm
It
sorry, I
forced
am
me
not
to
actually a
study
host.
Talmud
Yeah.
regularly.
So I'm going to ask my colleague Amy, who is secretly in the background. I do not have power to call on people, it looks like. So Amy, would you either bring people to the microphone or make me a co-host of the meeting?
Hang on, I'm going to make you a co-host.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm looking at the chat right now. Since, whoa, well. Oh, Shira, good afternoon. So is this group in Chicago?
This is a worldwide group.
Oh, okay.
This group is everywhere. All right. All right. So Janine, we'll start with you. We've got a lot of hands up, but we will get to what we can. So Janine, go ahead.
Oh, thank you very much. I really did I enjoyed it all. There was a lot of demon talk and incantations and all like that, which at some point was overwhelming. But related to that is that I really appreciated this notion that this was a very much an in-between time of the rabbis kind of getting more control, but a lot of Jews who didn't follow them, and also still being very much an area in which they a time in which they really thought about rebuilding the temple. And so how did you what I read sounds totally plausible, but how did you find out and figure out what to say about that, about the different parts of Jews and also the Nazarenes too? I mean, this was a very complicated time with all these different people, existing and maybe getting along, maybe not getting along. So what were your sources on that?
Okay, I am lucky living in Los Angeles that we have
Oh, hang on, Maggie, you're muted. Let me see if we can fix that.
trying to unmute. There we go.
All right, you are lucky living in Los Angeles
because we have UCLA and USC have amazing libraries, and the Claremont colleges, which are of course Christian colleges, they have their libraries. I got access to those, but within my own zip code, walkable distance is LMU, Loyola Marymount University. And you don't need to know much about other than that name to know that they would have had and they do have a fabulous library. They had just rebuilt it when we moved here in 2008. And living in the same zip code as LMU, I was entitled to a neighbor library card. So I could use the library, check out books, do whatever there, access to all their resources. And early Christianity is a big topic in the Christian scholarly world. I mean, if I had belonged to the Biblical Archaeology Society back then, that would have been useful, but now I don't. Now I don't look up that kind of stuff. But there is so much sources, the Roman sources, the Persian sources, the Talmud, and those sources are assumed to be historically accurate. So there was no lack of sources, especially, Roman history and early Christian history is very important to the Christian scholarly world. So there was, as I said, no lack of resources. And those guys also wrote stuff down like crazy. They're almost as bad as the rabbis in terms of commenting and writing down what they thought about the various arguments. Oh my goodness, the difference, the arguments about the anyway, the corporality, was Jesus really God's son? Was he real person? Was he anyway? Was he corporal? Was he not? The early Christians just went crazy writing down and arguing it with each other. They're worse than the rabbis of the Talmud in terms of that. But I did have access to it if I wanted to get the Roman, their view. The Christians argued with the Romans too. So there were a lot of sources.
Were there like certain books that were particularly significant for you? You mentioned the Gideon Bohawk book on magic. Were there particular authors or books that were really helpful for Christian or Roman sources for you?
No, because I went to the library, I checked them out, and I photocopied the pages that I wanted. And then when I was done with the book, I don't even know if I saved those because there was no reason to go back and see them again. I was much more interested in actually the status of women and their history, which wasn't in most of those sources, unfortunately. I mean, the Talmud too doesn't say a whole lot about women, but some of the Roman sources did. Women were much more, had much more power and authority, and especially the wealthy ones. But I was interested in the Romans insofar as they had occupied the land of Israel and how they interacted with the Jewish leadership. I did not look at, I was not that interested in the times of destruction of the temple. That was before my character's time. Other than knowing that in the time of this book, everybody was hoping, all the Jews were hoping the temple would get rebuilt. I mean, honestly, they still think the temple, hoping the temple will get rebuilt. But their big chance was with the Roman emperor, whose name now escapes me, but the one who was not a Christian and who, frankly, hated Christians. There are books that I had access to, books that the Romans of that time had actually written. So I was able to, take those out of the library and know from the horse's mouth, shall we say, what they thought and what history was important to them. But I was not, the Romans were in the background. It was the Persians who were in the foreground. And as far, I certainly agree, there's no question why Shapur the Great got named the Great. And that history is available. The Persians wrote it down. It's not translated as much as the Romans, but there were books, and they're probably, I could, they've got to be in my bibliography someplace. But that was fascinating, learning all the Persian influence and the Persian view, because they were the direct government that the rabbis were living under. And the rabbis certainly had trouble. Well, let's say they had competition. They had several competitions. I'm going
to pause you here because I really do want to get to some more questions, if you don't mind.
Okay.
The history
There's
is
no
awesome
doubt that there were
really interesting. But we want to talk about the book too. And I'm afraid we'll run out of time.
There were 1 million Jews living in Babylonia at that time. And that was one of the most astonishing things that I learned. And most of them were not followers of the rabbis.
Yes, that's an interesting aspect of the history that's not so clear if you're studying from the inside of Talmud, that the Talmudic rabbis were competing with others for who would be the authority in the Jewish community. I'm gonna let Mona jump in with her comment, and then we're gonna try and bring some more people into the conversation.
Oh, I see. Oh my gosh,
well.
that's right. So many hands up.
First
Okay,
of all,
Mona.
Maggie, if I may call you Maggie, I want to say how much I love your writing. It is amazing. I am a complete fan of the Talmud. I'm doing Daf Yomi for the past 5 years, and it has transformed my life. And it's kind of the world's biggest book club, you know.
Yeah.
But your depiction, most recently I read Rav Hisda's Daughter a while ago, and most recently read The Enchantress, which I just adored. And your description of women vis-a-vis demons and vis-a-vis magic is so powerful. And I think that a lot of this actually is in the Talmud. I mean, it's quite
Oh,
remarkable.
yes, almost all of it.
So I'll be reading, because I've done, now more than half, and I'll be reading one of your stories, and you'll tell a story. There'll be a story about Rava and one of the other people, and I'm like, wait a minute, I know the story. I read the story. It's absolutely brilliant. I wanted to ask you a question, and clearly from what you've told us today, your scholarship, your research goes deep, and you have, I think, a scholar's soul. But I'm curious, what brought you to all of this? What's your background in terms of where you came to this? Did you have a religious background? Did you have a scholarly background? What brought you to these topics that has influenced us so much?
Okay, I was brought up in a secular socialist household. We celebrated Hanukkah. I never went to. As a child, or till I met my husband to be, I had been in a synagogue once when I was just like around 13, and one of my classmates at junior high school invited me to his bar mitzvah. And I went to it, and I had no idea what was going on, and didn't have any idea again until years later. But my family was definitely Jewish. We did not have a Christmas tree. We went to a more religious family's Seder. So I knew about Passover, and we went there every year. But otherwise, we were completely secular, but also very well read. My dad had his den. All the walls were bookcases, and I learned about. I took out books. I read books from there. We went to the library every week, my mother and I, and my sister, on Wednesday night when my father said he was playing volleyball. We later found out that it was a less savory stuff he was playing with. But anyway, so I grew up in a household where reading books and learning was very important, but not Jewish learning. And then that went on until I met Dave, who is now my husband of half a century, more than half a century. Anyway, he was not Jewish. I won't go into the details, but he was my fiance's roommate at UCLA. I don't say any more about that. But his roommate, took him around. He didn't seem to have any friends or anybody he knew, so we took him around with us. And eventually, Dave fell in love with me, and in the stairwells of one of the dorms where we were living, he proposed to me. He was very old school. You fall in love with somebody, and then you get married, not like today. So, but he proposed. Not only did he say, will you marry me? He said, I will convert to marry you. And if I hadn't been sitting down in the stairwell, I would have fallen down. I would, even though as secular as we were, I never would convert for anybody. So I took him seriously, and we joined the class that would-be converts go to, and Intro to Judaism at the local Reform synagogue. And that's where I learned about Judaism, because they make the prospective spouses go. They know very well that we know nothing, or less than, certainly way less than your partner would know after attending this class. So I attended Intro to Judaism. I learned all kinds of stuff. I attend part of homework is you go to services every week. That's where I got my enough Jewish education that actually I could say that I knew stuff. And I learned about, there was such a thing as Talmud. We didn't study it in there, but I had read Rachel Adler's or about her and some of her articles. Remember, this is back in like the 1960s when feminism was barely raising its head. So she was the Jewish feminist par excellence. And when I heard that she was starting a women's Talmud class meeting at her home, I immediately signed up for it. I had no idea what I was getting into. There's only like a minion of us around her dining table. Everyone else in the class except me was either a rabbi or a rabbinic student. And we were studying not in English. We were talking in English, but our sources were not English. I really had to, it was the most intense scholarly thing I had done other than taking, than my, chemical science classes at UCLA. So I was in this class. And of course, the first thing Rachel has to tell us about is Rashi, who's on the corner of the page everywhere, and how he had no sons, only daughters. Whose names I eventually did research and found out what they were. And not from Rashi and not from the husbands, but from their sons who wrote all those commentaries. I found out what their mothers' names were. So that's the thing that got me started. I was studied with Rachel in that Talmud class for over 5 years. We barely got through Brachot, but I kept going, and I still do Talmud with the Mishnah Yomit from the conservative movement in Jerusalem, that they send a piece of Mishnah by email every day. So, and I don't know that if we're doing it by order or not, but that's how I continue, and I
think you're inspiring to a lot of people here who are saying they would not have guessed you didn't grow up with a very deep Jewish education.
No, and
I think a
anyway,
lot of people on this call are also adult learners. I'm going to invite another
made my
person to come
wall
into
of
the
Talmud.
conversation. That is a nice wall of Talmud. Kent and Linda, you have a hand up too.
So I'm Linda, and I read both series and just loved them. But the thing that impressed me most in Rav Hisda's daughter was your ability to move from like an 8 to 10-year-old to an adult speaker, and with changing her voice, and yet staying true to the character. I was just blown away by your ability to do that. And the other piece that I felt coincident with this conversation is the idea of the Baraita and the cross-pollination between Babylonia and the land of Israel. And I had never heard that before, and I thought that was fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you. This time period was very difficult for Jews. There were, as I said, there were 1 million Jews in Babylonia, but almost none of them rabbinic Jews. But they had, when they were exiled by Nebuchadnezzar, and then later given the opportunity to return to the land of Israel, most of them didn't. They were perfectly happy in Babylonia, and things in the land of Israel were not that good under the Romans. And so I had no idea that if you just read Torah and the Psalms and you think that they say, oh, the Jews returned. Well, they did. I mean, a small amount of them did, but most of them did not. And in Babylonia, there was a big rivalry between the rabbinic Jews, who the rabbis were trying to convert to their idea of Judaism, and the non-rabbinic Jews, who were just, well, there was no Talmud anyway yet, who were doing just fine. They had synagogues, they went to them, they did whatever the Torah, or they did stuff that the Torah told them. They did not eat pork. So they were perfectly happy and content with the Judaism that was biblical Judaism. And they, frankly, a lot of them had antipathy towards the rabbinic Jews, who are coming up with all these new things they need to do and new restrictions that they should live under. And I tried to capture that, but it was, I mean, like, we're kind of in that time period now. We have Reform Jews, we have secular Jews, we have Hasidic Jews, all kind, we kind of get along, but we kind of don't. So that I could very much identify with the time period in which the rabbinic Jews were trying to get the non-rabbinic Jews to be more observant of what the rabbis said they should be doing. And frankly, if I had lived in that time period, I probably wouldn't have been a rabbinic Jew.
Most of us probably wouldn't have been. Just
it
by
was
numbers.
onerous.
Lori also has a question and comment.
Okay.
Am I the only Lori?
You're the only one with your hand up.
Okay, perfect.
And you're at the top of the pictures of everybody, so I know that it's the group is focusing on you.
So my question is, I'm just so curious how you constructed the book. This is my first time reading anything that you've written. I'm incredibly amazed. I feel immersed in the time period. I'm a Daf Yomi person, my first go around. And I'm just so curious, did you collect passages and say, oh, this is great, I'm going to collect this, I'm going to incorporate it into the book? Or did you have these characters and then have to go back and say, what passage can I find that gives light and color to these characters? It's just so brilliant. And how did you do that?
Well, frankly, I did both of those. But how I did that goes back to my childhood, when I started reading, or my mother took me to the library, and I discovered the All of a Kind family books. I was a voracious reader as a child. So I was probably 7 or 8 when I discovered the All of a Kind family by Sidney Taylor. And I believe there's 5 or 6 books in that series. And I'm assuming everybody in here is familiar with the All of a Kind family books. But for me, that was how I learned as a child. What I learned about Judaism came out of those books. Because the family does Lower East Side, Yiddish, and they do all the Jewish holidays, they do all the Jewish events, and as seen through the eyes of this family of 5 girls. And as I said, I learned a lot. And when it came time that I became infatuated with Rashi and realized, and Rachel told us that he had no sons, only daughters. And I decided I want to do for Rashi and his family what All of a Kind family did. Immerse myself as an invisible participant in what they would be doing. And, when they made wine, they made wine. When they made parchment, they made parchment. When they went to synagogue, they went to synagogue. And one thing I learned is that women attended synagogue as much as the men back in Rashi's time. And so I used All of a Kind family as my template. And I did not write my characters from the first person. I was the invisible onlooker. And that's how I set up my style of writing and how I was going to take my reader along with me into the life of Rashi and his daughters. I already had read, but I had read this 5 books of All of a Kind family, and I still reread them. I still enjoy following them along. So I already knew how I would do it, even though I had never written anything.
Let's invite Devorah in too.
What?
Let's invite Devorah into the conversation.
Okay. Oh, Devorah's hands up. Yes.
Yes. I tried to get the book out of the library and they sent me The Enchantress because I just said Rod Hisda's daughter. And then I remembered I had the book on my shelf. I thought it was in a box, but it was on my shelf. And I opened it up and you signed it in October of 2014 at my synagogue when you came and talked to my sisterhood. So thank you very much for putting the date in here when you signed it.
Oh, yes.
Because it was very helpful to me. So, but I had read Rashi's Daughters before I read that one. And that's why we invited you to come. And I only started studying Talmud just before COVID. Our rabbi started a Talmud class on Saturday mornings. And he has left my synagogue, and I and another person took over the class, and another person, that person went on to rabbinic school. He's in rabbinic school now.
Oh, that could happen.
I'm just doing it by myself, but it's very interesting to just read through and hear about, and you give such, you fill out the information amazingly. And I've recommended your books to other people as well. And thank you for being here. But I had a technical question. You always use the word Am Haaretz. You didn't ever use the plural form, Amei Haaretz. And I was just wondering why.
My Hebrew's not that good.
Okay. That works.
So
thank you.
I mean, more people are familiar with Am Haaretz than they are to know that there's actually a plural form that sounds different. So
this is a challenge we have on the editorial side at My Jewish Learning too. Like so we actually put English plurals on Hebrew words because the plurals, the Hebrew plural, like an English speaker wouldn't necessarily recognize that Amei Haaretz is the plural of Am Haaretz. So according to our style guide, we'll do things like the Am Haaretzes, right? Which is very awkward, but we will sometimes, that is one thing we do to try to mark, but it is a perpetual challenge when you're working with multiple languages. I don't see too many other hands up, so I wanted to share a comment from my reading of this book, and this was my first time reading it. That what really there were lots of things that resonated for me, but one of them was that you sit and read the Talmud and you hear like Mishnah, Breita, counter Breita, like you see this flow of argument and you wonder and how it all got put together. And what I loved about your book was when you sat us in the classroom and had us imagine what the interaction between a teacher and their students might sound like and how that led to the construction of something written like the Talmud, which is sort of not a format of writing that we're familiar with from elsewhere, this kind of, and it sort of, it makes me see the Talmud even more so as just a window into a classroom in a way that I hadn't thought about it before. So I wanted to say thank you for that component. And I wanted to give anyone else a chance who wanted to ask a question. We can probably do one more before we have to finish for the hour.
Well, I want to say a little bit before we get to the end.
Sure.
Is that Midwives Escape, it is and will be my last book. It's not, frankly, I'm losing money on it. And COVID really didn't just kill people. It killed book groups in person. And so I mean, yes, we're doing this in Zoom, which is probably the way to do it if you have 174 people in the group. But for me, talking in person is a different kind of bond with the people who are there. And selling and signing books and answering questions in the back of the room is what made it financially viable for me to go all over the country and eventually to out of the country. And I just couldn't. Also, I'm 75 and I do not want to spend my retirement dealing with air flights and setting up gigs. And then once COVID came along, nobody wanted, including me, to do in-person stuff anymore. And thank heavens for Zoom, but it's not as satisfying. So I have I've severely cut back on a speaking schedule. But I see there's somebody who has a friend in Rock Tavern, New York. I have no idea where that is or what that is. But I do hope to actually come to the Chicago area at some point in the fall. But even more so, my oldest grandson has, who is a star volleyball player, got a scholarship to Manhattan University in the Bronx, where they are starting a men's volleyball team for the first time. And when I looked up on where that was, it's like, oh my God, it's in the middle of a Jewish area. There's the two women's yeshivas are there, walking distance, and more than a dozen synagogues. And I'm thinking, okay, I can, let's see if I can set up some speaking gigs in the Bronx. And under the excuse of going to the Bronx and doing speaking, I can sneak in and visit my grandson and watch his volleyball team play. So if you know anybody in the Bronx, I am certainly eager to go visit there in the spring. So just tossing that out. But honestly, it's not easy doing all these book tours, especially the ones that, I mean, even the ones that I drive to. Like I live in Los Angeles and I did a gig in Irvine this week at their JCC. So,
all right, folks know how to find you. You have a very findable website, right? It's maggieanton.com.
Yeah, still trying to keep it up. But
all right,
my goal is to get more people
schedule.
to study Talmud. So thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for writing this book and making Talmud come alive in new ways for so many of us. And thank you to all of you who came to this event to share what you learned from this book and get a chance to learn from the author and who is with us. I just wanted to announce real quickly as we finish that the next installment of this series, Off the Daf, a Talmud book club, will be on August 18th. And our next installment is Sage Tales by Rabbi Bert Vizatsky. So diving into some of the Talmud's best loved stories. And the author will be joining us for that as well. That's August 18th at noon Eastern. So it was lovely to see you all. If you're on our Talmud listserv, we'll see you in your inbox tomorrow morning. Thank you.
How do I get on the Talmud listserv?
Good question. How do you sign up for Daily Dose of Talmud? Let me see if I can grab that link right now.
Somebody can email it to me because otherwise I have to write it.
Yeah, but there might be somebody else who wants it too. I've got it now. Here's how you sign up. If you're not, I know from the names here that a lot of folks in this call already are, but you're welcome to join us too, Maggie. So thank you.
You can just go to the My Jewish Learning website and follow it. It'll give you the instructions.
You can, you can find it on our homepage. I also put a direct link to the sign up. It's mydjewishlearning.com/get-your-daily-dose-of-Talmud with a lot of hyphens in it. So click the link. All right, this was a pleasure to read, a pleasure to discuss with you all. And I'm wishing everybody a wonderful Monday.